Welcome to the Refurbishment Mastery podcast with me, Martin Rapley. If you're a property investor who is worried about paying too much for your next property, concerned that you don't know how to manage a refurb, or scared that you will be ripped off by a builder, then this is for you. In this podcast, I share over 30 years of experience of managing refurbishments and conversions to help you make more profit, save your time, and ultimately enjoy the process. On with the podcast. Hi there, welcome to this episode in which I'm going to be talking about someone that you may meet on your project, and for some people they see them as the enemy. I'm here to say they're not the enemy. Hopefully by the time you get to the end of this episode you'll understand why they aren't the enemy. The people I'm referring to are independent monitoring surveyors. And you're going to come across IMS, Independent Monitoring Surveyors, when you use commercial finance to fund the works that you're carrying out to your property. So you may not come across them on smaller projects, on simple projects, but as soon as you're using commercial finance to fund the works, not fund the purchase, but fund the works in some kind of drawdown facility, then that's where you're going to meet independent monitoring surveyors. And they are acting on behalf of your lender. So your lender, who is likely to be some kind of commercial bank, some kind of financial institution, their expertise is managing money, lending money, securing funds, etc., etc. Their expertise is not understanding the day-to-day mechanics of the construction works that are going to be carried out on your particular project. So as a result, they engage someone who is more of an expert in development and construction work. And these independent monitoring surveyors, by and large, have come from a construction background or a project management background. Many of them will actually be members of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, RICS, because a lot of the work that they're doing is surveying orientated, quantity surveying orientated. So these are the experts that will be the eyes and ears on your project on behalf of your lender who is lending you the money. Now, although they're actually working for the lender, you unfortunately have to pay for them. Now, you won't normally pay them directly. You'll normally pay them through your drawdown facility that comes from your lender. So you often won't necessarily pay them directly, but it will be an indirect payment. Normally, you'll pay them an initial fee, and I'll come back to what they're going to do for that shortly. And then you will pay them a fee each time they come and visit the project. And normally they'll come and visit the project each time you want more money to help progress the works. And normally that request for funds ties up with your contractor requesting funds, and normally that's on a monthly basis. So you need to factor in the cost of an initial fee and then a number of drawdowns as your project goes on. The initial fee is often a little bit higher. There's a bit more work needed in the first instance to verify and understand the whole of your project, and they'll write a report that goes back to your lender and gives them a full overview of your project in terms that the lender will understand. So they'll cut out a lot of the technical side of things, and they will just refer to use terminology that is understood generally. They'll also flag up risks within the project, concerns that they might have, shortcomings that may be there in the early stages. And I wouldn't be too worried about some shortcomings in the early stages as long as you can resolve them later on. And then there'll be a fee for coming out to visit you. Now, normally those fees are a little bit less than the initial fee, uh, assuming the surveyor isn't too far away from your property. And the lenders will normally have a bank of surveyors in different parts of the country. So they'll be talking to surveyors that are reasonably close to you, probably within an hour or 90 minutes of where your project is. Uh, and following those visits, and those visits probably they won't be on site and at more than an hour normally. So there's some travel time and an hour on site, and then they will write another report. But a lot of those reports become more of an update on the original report. So they're that much quicker to write. As a very rough rule of thumb, and I'm now going back to the times where uh, I've worked with monitoring surveyors, so I've had to pay them, and actually times when I did actually also act as a monitoring surveyor on behalf of a number of lenders when I had my consultancy business. A very rough rule of thumb, none of these should be over £1,000. I think your initial fee is probably £600 to £800, maybe a little bit more on a complex project, and your visit fees are probably five to £800 again, depending on the complexity of your project. So, so these are the guys that are acting as experts for your lender, and ultimately they are going to flag things up to your lender that may be of concern to your lender. And ultimately, your lender needs to know that the funds they're giving to you are being deployed correctly on a project that is being run correctly and managed correctly, and ultimately will be delivered in line with the terms that you've agreed as far as the duration of your loan. And ultimately, the lender wants to know that they're, at the end of the day, they're going to get their money back from you delivering your project in the way that you originally proposed to deliver the project. So when you meet the monitoring surveyor, or when you first speak to the monitoring surveyor in the early stages, and this could very easily be before you've had any drawdown funds for the project. You may have had some drawdown funds for the actual purchase, but this will be before you have any drawdown funds for the progress of the works, and potentially before you've even started work on site. Different lenders have different criteria, so do understand what your particular lender's criteria are and how it operates, and when these people, when the independent monitoring surveyors are going to get involved with your project. But it is going to be the first involvement you have with them is going to be early on in your scheme. And they're probably going to ask you a lot of questions. They're probably also going to come and meet you, but they don't always come and meet you at this early stage. But they will ask you a good number of questions. Now, a lot of those questions will be in some kind of pro forma form that they'll send you where you can fill out the details. The way I used to do it was actually I sent an empty Google folder system and just asked my clients or my lender's clients to save any documents that were relevant for any of the titles of those folders. And I used to start with lots of documents from them, and I'll talk about those kind of documents shortly. And then when I had those documents, I would then go back and often ask a few questions that where the documents themselves just didn't fully clarify exactly what I was, was what exactly what I needed to know or what I knew my clients actually needed to know as part of their lending criteria. So that folder that I had, it had something like 30 odd folders or 30 odd subfolders within it. And not every subfolder was relevant for every single property. Um, but some of my clients would say, oh, this feels really daunting, and would feel as though it was, me being, super suspicious, as it were. But I'm here to say that that wasn't the stance. That isn't the aim at all. The aim is to get a good understanding of your particular project. And a lot of those folders in the early days won't actually have anything in them. But as the project progresses, more and more documents will come to light, and they can all be saved into that folder in a nice, simple, logical way, so that everyone's got access to everything they need. So don't be surprised if you're asked questions in the early days. The kinds of things that you're going to need to um, answer questions about, or demonstrate, or share with, and there's different ways different people do it. You may well be you're going to be asked to give them a list of all of the consultants you're working with. They may well ask for the terms that you've agreed with those consultants. They may want to see that those uh, consultants have got insurance. They could ask for the planning information, the proof that you've got planning permission for your property. They're going to want copies of the drawings and the specifications. You might have had some specialist reports carried out, maybe on the ground condition. Maybe you had asbestos or something like that. So they could be asking for information like that. They could be asking for party wall awards to verify that you have actually given notice to your neighbours. They may well be asking for information about structural warranties, who is looking after your building regulation, and then information about the contractor. Who is your contractor? Have you got some contract documents in place with the contractor? What does the contractor's program look like? What does their cash flow forecast look like? Have you got a copy of their insurances? Where are you with respect to management of health and safety? Have you got a CDM consultant on board? And various other things like this. So nothing in there, I hope, that's overly daunting or overly complicated, but obviously some things that you're going to have to just pull together and think about. So there could be some things in there that in the first instance you can't actually answer. Generally, I wouldn't be worried about that. Generally, your lender is not expecting you to be 100% accurate with everything the day you start the project. You will obviously need to get everything in place as the project goes forwards. But what you'll find is, as part of your broker's application on your behalf to the lender, they will have discussed your previous experience, the setup of your business, etc. And if your experience is limited and the setup is perhaps just you on your own, then they already know, and the lenders already know, that they're not dealing with someone who is super experienced. Now, not all lenders will work with you in that situation, but some lenders definitely will work with you in that situation. And those were often the lenders that I ended up doing IMS work for. Those lenders that were happier to work with less experienced people on site. And as a result, part of my remit was to help the borrowers close up the gaps in their paperwork, help them understand what was needed, why it was needed, and agree a timeline for the delivery of those elements that were missing, but also help them understand, the why it's needed, but what exactly what we're after. So generally, independent monitoring surveyors are not there to trip you up. The lenders have generally already accepted you as a borrower, so they're not really looking to trip you up. But the significant thing to remember here is that the lender ultimately wants their money back. At the end of the term you've agreed, they want their money back. And so the monitoring surveyor is looking to help you ensure that you succeed so that you can pay back the money. And in helping you to succeed, they're going to ask you questions. And some of those questions might lead you to think, oh, my word, I've got a problem here. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because if you have got a problem, if you have got something missing, some information missing, or someone you're working with hasn't given you what you should be getting, then isn't it good that you know about it nice and early on, can close up the gap, get that sorted out, and take away some of the risk? Just jumping in to make sure that you've got everything you need. Now, in a number of these podcasts, you'll have heard me talk about other property investors that I'm currently working with or have worked with in the past. And so I wanted to ensure that you can find out how you can actually work with me. And the best place to start with that is my website, www.refurbishmentmastery.com. On there, you'll find details of training courses that I run. You'll find details about my community, and also how you can work with me on a one-to-one basis when you are progressed far enough down the line. And then if you're not really sure what's right for you and how we can work together, then there's a button at the top. Just hit the button at the top that says book a call. It's absolutely free. It will take you to my diary, find a slot, and we'll be able to talk in the next couple of weeks. Remember, the website is refurbishmentmastery.com. I really look forward to helping you with a successful delivery of all of your projects. Now back to the podcast. Absolutely. And particularly if you're delivering this project pretty much on your own with a builder, is it not good that you have someone else looking over you and just verifying that you aren't about to have a problem, or there isn't a risk on the horizon? So, for instance, in the early days, you may say, yes, I've posted all my drawings that showed the planning application, and I've given you a copy of the planning decision notice that gave me planning permission to carry out the work that I'm doing at the moment. The monitoring surveyor may look at that planning permission, or will look at that planning permission, and will probably note that there are some conditions on that planning. Now, the conditions will be you must start the work within 3 years. So the monitoring surveyor will report back to the lender that one of the conditions is we must start in 3 years. And the monitoring surveyor will write, this is the date the planning was granted, therefore the 3 years expires on this date, and will then note if there is any concerns there. Clearly, if it's missed the 3 years, you're not going to get the finance, to be blunt about it. If time is limited, then there will be an incentive to, or everyone will be motivated to get things started quickly. There could be another condition listing out the drawings that have got to be followed. There could be other conditions that you need to discharge at some point. Maybe you've forgotten about those. Maybe you just completely missed the fact there was a condition that says, before final occupancy, you must submit some details as to where the bins are going to be stored. And you might have forgotten about that. The monitoring surveyor will pick that up, and on day one, they won't be at all concerned that you haven't done anything about discharging that condition. But as the project goes on, in their subsequent and later visits, they'll start to ask you, well, how are you getting on with discharging that condition? And in the early days, it doesn't matter, because the project's not going to be finished for 6 to 8 months. It's low priority. But as you start to get to near the end of the project, the monitoring surveyor will continue to prompt you. So it's all good stuff, really. You're being prompted to get things right. And the reason for this is if in the worst case scenario, everything goes wrong for you and your lender has to reclaim the project from you, they need to know that they can finish it all off and everything is being carried out properly. They don't want to know that the planning condition hasn't been discharged because then there is potentially less or no value in that site if they have to recover it from you. We don't want to ever be in that situation, and I've I've never really been in that situation. I did work with uh, I did work with a developer who got their project repossessed, but they hadn't actually started on site. Effectively, the lender established that they hadn't got the skills that they'd led everyone to believe they had, and yeah, it got repossessed at that point. I'm not sure I've ever got involved with a project that has been repossessed part way through. I have been involved with projects, particularly when I was an independent monitoring surveyor, where some of the things going on the site were not the best, and I had to force issues. I had to flag up my concerns back to the lender that I had concerns about what the contractor was doing, the way they were doing it, the way they were delivering things. And ultimately, some lenders will have possibly, and I don't wouldn't always know the background here, but possibly not have given them as much money as they wanted because they would have seen a lot more risk attached to it, or they will give funds subject to XYZ being sorted out for next month. But the key thing here is the independent monitoring surveyor is independent of you, working on behalf of the bank, but they're going to ask you questions and ask for information that ultimately will help you deliver a better product and help you deliver your project quicker with less risk and get to a point where you can sell it or refinance it that much quicker or easier later on down the line. So don't be, whilst some of them may come over sounding a little officious, that's not really how they're needing to sound. Maybe if you've slipped up on things multiple months on the trot, they might start to be a little bit more officious. But in reality, they are acting independently, and are you know, as with everyone, they're doing a job. They're looking after their client. Their client is, of course, the lender who's given you hundreds of thousands of pounds to do the work on your project. So they will feed things back. But the questions they ask you, uh, I would look at them from two counts. First of all, is it's information they need to feed back to your lender, but secondly, it's a prompt, it's a reminder, it's a check-in to help you ensure that you deliver your project in the most successful way you possibly can. So there's a lot more things that they could ask for as the project goes on. In reality, nothing really would surprise you. You know, other things I used to ask for were photos. I used to take photos whenever I went to the project, which normally would be on a monthly basis. But I used to encourage some of the borrowers that I was working with to send interim photos. Sometimes I'd say, can you send a photo when the roof has gone on? Can you send a photo when all the windows are in? And things like that. Later on, I'd be wanting them to make sure that they were on top of the completion certificates, building control sign off, uh, structural warranties, testing certificates, and things like that. If there were things flagged up by building control, I'd want to see that they had dealt with those things that building control had flagged up. I'd want to see that they were still on budget. I'd want to see that they're still on time. If they're going over budget, I'd want to know that it was within the pre-agreed contingency. And if it's not, I would feed that back. If they're running over time, these things happen. It's not necessarily life or death type situation, but if the things are running late, a week or two probably isn't a problem. But a month or two for some lenders could be a bit of an issue. We have a conversation about what they're doing. I worked as a monitoring surveyor on one project. The client was converting a barn into three very high quality properties. The market at the time was not going the right way. She was concerned that the sales values weren't going to be what she was expecting when the project started, but she was very, very practical. And I would go to a meeting with her. She'd say, I've done this research. This is what I'm going to do. I found another lender that's going to put me into a different finance package at the end. I'm going to rent this one out. I've pre-agreed a sale on this one. And as a result, every time I went to see her, it was really easy to write a report. Yes, she had some difficulties. Prices were skyrocketing, values were dropping a little bit. This was actually soon after COVID, 2022 type time, where things were just all over the place. But what was really nice was every time I went to see her, she was aware that she had some challenges, but importantly, she was also working on reducing those issues. And it was really easy for me to feed back to her lender that she was aware of the challenges and difficulties she had, and that she was she was taking steps to mitigate those potential problems. And that's the kind of thing lenders want to hear. They know there's some risk attached to this. That's ultimately why they charge you the interest rates they do. That's why they will never lend you 100% of of everything. They'll normally have some kind of skin in the game somewhere. Different lenders will work differently, but it could be based against the original purchase price. It could be secured against another property somewhere else. That's outside of what I need to be talking to you about here. But ultimately, they know there's some risk. They know things could go a little bit negative, as it were. What they really want is a good feedback from the independent monitoring surveyor to say that we're aware there's some risk. This is what we're doing. This is where we are. Things are pushing. We're pushing things on as best as we can under whatever the circumstances are. And as a result, you shouldn't have any difficulty getting your regular drawdowns. And that's critical because that's obviously the funds that you're passing on to your builder, potentially on a monthly basis. Now, just to say there about passing money on to the builder on a monthly basis, remember that sometimes your loan agreement may include other funds. So you may be able to get funds for other consultants, for other expenses and costs relating to delivering your project. Every project's different in that respect. Every loan agreement is different in that respect. So you do need to understand your own loan agreement. But I would just want to sow the seed that you don't necessarily just need to get from your lender what you need to pay on to the builder. In some cases, that's all you're going to get. But in other cases, you can sometimes get a little bit more. So I would generally tie the whole lot up into one meeting. I would meet my contractor. I would meet my independent monitoring surveyor. I would agree with the contractor the value of the work they've done. I would pass that on to the monitoring surveyor, perhaps with a summary of other costs that may be appropriate to recover if that is part of the loan that you've got. And depending on how your builder is, you may well have the builder and the monitoring surveyor, talking at a little bit more of a technical level. But don't duck out of that conversation completely. But at least be part of it, even if you don't fully understand everything. At least be part of it. But remember, the monitoring surveyor is there to help you succeed. So if something is discussed that you're not totally clear about, talk to the monitoring surveyor. They're going to be someone who ought to be able to explain it to you in terms that you can understand. or if something's discussed, you don't be afraid to ask the monitoring surveyor, what might the impact be on my finance? They may not be able to tell you that, or they might be able to give you a bit of an idea. You might be able to say to them, what do you need to report back to my lender? What are you going to tell my lender? What are the concerns? What should I sort out? What's my priority? You talk to them because ultimately they want you to succeed, because your lender wants you to succeed. They're not there to trip them up. So in summary, they're not the enemy. They're not there to trip you up. Your lender wants their money back, and an easier way for your lender to get their money back is to have the monitoring surveyor helping the team deliver, giving them the certainty that they need, that everything is running reasonably smoothly. And it doesn't have to be absolutely running on rails. It just needs to be reasonably smoothly. And in that respect, because they are going to be professional people, that you don't be afraid to have conversation with them. But just to close off, they're not going to be the people that are likely to go out for a coffee with you after the meeting. By all means, offer them a cup of tea on site, but they're not going to be the kind of people that go off for a coffee shop or anything like that afterwards. They will pretty much do what they need to do, take the information they need, and move on. Don't see that as not being particularly friendly. They do need to keep themselves at a professional level above you. But by all means, have a chat with them, talk about holidays, talk about kids, talk about schools, talk about the weather, all the things you'd want to talk to someone about. Don't see them as the enemy. They're there to help you. So all the best with your larger projects. These are generally going to be on larger projects. All the best with your larger projects. All the best with working with independent monitoring surveyors. And as with anything I talk about on any of these podcasts, if there's ever anything I can help you with, then go to the website and book a call. And if I can answer the question there and then so much the better. Maybe we need to have a longer call another time, but I'll tell you from that initial free call. So keep in touch, and I really look forward to speaking to you again, one-to-one, or of course on another podcast at some time in the future.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. Please do like, share, and leave a comment where you can. If you need any guidance or advice with anything to do with your refurbishments or conversions, then don't hesitate to reach out. You can book a free call with me by clicking on the link at the top of my website, refurbishmentmastery.com. There's other ways you can contact me in the show notes as well. I look forward to speaking to you again soon.